Good morning, class. In preparation for our test, we're going to continue practicing with equations and expressions, and at the same time we'll get better at our error analysis. Let's work on example number 1. It says we are supposed to state whether the following steps are correct or not, and if they're wrong, we're supposed to circle the error and then explain why we believe that is an error. So let's look at this first problem. There's no equal sign, so that is what we call an expression. Since there's no equal sign, we will not be solving for x. We will just simply be making it more simple, simplifying. This is 0.5, which is equivalent to 1/2. So when I distribute it inside the parentheses, that's the same thing as saying half of 8x, which would be 4x. We also have to distribute the 0.5 over here, so that's half. 0.5 half of negative 2y would be negative 1y. Now I'm going to distribute the negative 5. Negative 5 times 2 would give us negative 10x, and then negative 5 times 3 would give us negative 15y. On these error analysis problems, you're going to find that it's very easy and simple to just compare with the next line below. So that 4x matches, our negative 1y matches, our negative 10x matches. So does our negative 15y. Then we take a look and see what happened between this and the next line. Okay, so this negative y, they moved over here, and that negative 10x, they moved over here, but that doesn't change anything. Just moving the order around. The negatives y was still a negative y, and the negative 10 was still negative 10. So no problem in that step. They just moved the order. And now we can tell a number did change. So how did they get that? Well, they must have combined their like terms, the x's. 4 minus 10. 4 minus 10. Well, the difference between those two is going to be 6, but that 10 is bigger than the 4, and it's negative, so the answer should be negative. So we found an error here, and I'm going to go ahead and circle it like they asked. Circle, that's supposed to be negative. Negative 1y and negative 15y does give us negative 16y, so that's correct. So the error was when you subtract 4 minus 10, 4 minus 10 should give negative 6 because there are more negatives than positives, right? Okay, so now we're done with example number 1. Example number 2, state whether the steps are correct or not. So same instructions as last time. If wrong, circle the error and explain your answer. We're looking here. First of all, I notice there is an equal sign here. I wonder if you remember what that means. It's called an equation. Equals, equation. So this means we will end up solving for an x. Notice here there was no equal sign. So we just simplified it. We made it look from this confusing step down to that simple step. Right now, we're actually going to end up solving for a letter. That's when we have an equation. I still have 2 parentheses, so I'm going to end up distributing. 5 times x is 5x. 5 times negative 1 is negative 5. Negative 4 times x is negative 4x. And negative 4 times negative 5 is positive 20. We compare it, right, correct, 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 correct. No errors in the first step. Then we can tell that there was a change here. So how did they get that? Well, if we're doing our next step from the work we did yesterday, we know we'd have to bring our x's to the same side. So we'd bring this over here, or you could bring that 5x to the other side. Since they have an x on the left, you can tell that since they have an x on the left, you can tell that they brought that 4 over. Alright, so now we have negative 4. How do we get that negative 4x and bring it over here? Plus 4x. Plus 4x. That cancels that, and now we're left with 5 plus 4x. That would give us 9x. Minus 5 gets brought down, and plus 20 is there. Well, there's an error we see. It should be 9x, and they have regular x. So that x is the error. Should be 9x, and what's our explanation? Had to add the opposite to get it over to this side, because had to add the opposite, and that was positive 4x, to get to other side. And this is actually one of the errors that some of you are making when you do these type of problems. You see this 4x and you see that 5x and you just try and do it immediately. Well, negative 4, positive 5, that is going to give us what they had right down here. A positive 1x is left over if you just do it straight away. But you can't move straight into that work. You had to say, how can I get that 4x to the other side? By adding the opposite. And so we're left there. That's the error that we see. Alright, at this point we've now done 2 examples. The rest of this sheet continues the same process. You're going to do the math, distribute, and identify the errors. If you prefer looking step by step and finding their problems, you can do that. If instead you prefer just doing it yourself, so recopying the problem, and then solving it yourself by hand over here, and then comparing it with what they wrote and seeing where the error is, you're welcome to do it that way. I typically think it's easier just to compare what they did step by step, but that's your call. As you have questions, please raise your hand and ask the teacher.